Hi everybody, and welcome to my second video on the Nikon FG. At the end of this video, I'm going to share some photos I've taken with this actual camera so you can see kind of how it performs. This video is going to be more intense than the first one, in that we're going to talk about some specific ways to use this camera and what the different functions do. But first, I'm going to show you some basic operation things, such as lens mounting and dismounting, film loading, and changing the battery. So starting with lens mounting and dismounting, the lens is on this camera already. So here's the lens release button. Push it down, just clamping your fingers together. Rotate clockwise, and then you take it off. You mount it the opposite way. This has a little auto-indexing connection right there, you can see. So you want to make sure that you're putting it in so that this dot that indicates the minimum aperture is pointing over in this direction, and that auto-indexing pin is way down, or connection is way down here, because you don't want it to mess up your automatic indexing connection. And there we go, you mount it, you just put it on, rotate it counterclockwise about a third of a turn until you feel it click into place. For loading the film, all you have to do is open up the back of the camera and open up the back of the camera. There we go. Then I've got my demo film right here. You just put that in, put the film spool knob, push that back into place, pull out the leader, feed the leader into the take-up spool like this. There we go. Or maybe that's working, I don't know yet. We'll find out. Dang it. Didn't work. We're going to try that again. And this is just not cooperating. Take three. We're going to feed the film into the leader. Oh my gosh. All right, it's going this. Oh. Here we go. Here we go. Is it gonna? No, no, it's not. What we're gonna do is we're gonna cut this. There we go. Now we're going to take this, we're going to feed the, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. I can feel the subscribers leaving. I can sense all the subscribers leaving right now. I'm going to have none left. Here we go. That took. All right, so the way that it's supposed to work is that you just feed the leader into the take-up spool, and then you advance it a couple times. Now in real life, you're supposed to shut this, but I'm not going to do it, so I'm going to show you a little bit of how this works. So the first thing we want to do is, after you shut it, you want to tighten up the film in the spool. Okay, there we go, get it nice and tight. That way, when you take an exposure, you can see that rotate, and that will indicate the film is leaving the cassette and being taken up and advancing to the next film, or next frame. So when you take a picture, what's happening is you're pulling unused film from here over the image plane. The image is being taken onto the film right in here, and then it's being taken up on the take-up spool over here. And then there's a little 2mm gap between each frame. So each time you do this, it advances the frame 38mm. There we go. And so that's how the film take-up works. Now, after you've gone through all 24 or 36 of your images, you unload the film by pushing that down. It should stay right in place. You shouldn't have to hold it. And then with the back closed, that stays in place like that. And then you just unroll it. And when you hear that sound and feel a change in pressure, the film leader has left the take-up spool. Now, for real use, you'll want to take this and rewind it all the way into the cassette so that you don't accidentally use it again. This is the same film that I use on all of these videos, so I don't want to do that because it can be a little bit of a pain to retrieve it. So that is loading and unloading the film. Next thing we're going to do is take a look at changing the battery. This camera uses 2 LR44 batteries. And those are standard batteries. You can get them at any convenience store or pharmacy because they're used for a lot of medical devices. Typically you just use a quarter to open this. I forgot to grab my quarter from my prop setup, which is my coin jar. So I'm just going to open it with a blunt butter knife. So you just unscrew. There we go. And it takes both of these LR44s. Come on, get out of there. And the way that they go in is, well, we're going to try it. I think they go negative down, plus up. You can see the plus there. That's the smooth side going up like that, the divoted side going down towards the base of the battery holder. And you just put it in, screw it in place, and if you've done your job correctly, then when you get to the first frame, the shutter won't jam, and it's not, as you go through it. Okay, so here's your hot shoe, and that's where you can mount your flash. Your flash syncs at a maximum speed of, a minimum speed, well, depends on how you, the fastest shutter speed that you can use to sync is 1/90th of a second. That's your flash sync speed. And what that means is that if you have it set at 1/125th when you use your flash, part of your image is going to be black because part of the shutter curtain will be in the way of your image. So to use your flash, you either need to have it set at 60th, 30th, 15th, 8th, 4th, a quarter, a half, a full second, M90 or bulb. M90 is a fine setting to use, I believe, for your flash. I don't use flash very often, so it's not necessarily my area of expertise. But the sync speed's 1/90th. That's the fastest that you can use it, and that's what's important to know for that. The flash, this will only take X flashes, and those are the modern flashes. Any flash you can buy on a store shelf right now will work with this camera. So in the first video, I talked a little bit about this exposure compensation button, and I said it had a couple of different uses. So let's say that you want to bracket your image, and bracketing your image means that you're going to take one image that's properly exposed, one that's underexposed, and one that's overexposed. And the reason is because you'll get different effects. You can also compile the images in post-processing software to get HDR. Also, you might not be you might have good reason not to trust your light meter. So you might want to take multiple images just to make sure that the image comes out as you see it or as you want it to show up, turn out on the film. So you can easily bracket images with the FG. All you have to do is push down this button, do a 1-stop underexposure, 2-stop. You can also do 1.5 or 2.5, 1/2. So there are 4 bracketing increments each way, half-stop increments, and that's the same as changing your shutter speed from 1/60th to 1/30th. If you're in manual mode, all you've got to do is change your shutter speed. So where the exposure compensation dial comes into play is when you're using automatic mode. So let's say you're holding your camera and it's metered your scene at 1/250th of a second at f7 or f8 rather. Well, that's all well and good. Now it'll underexpose it a little bit, and now it'll underexpose it a lot, overexpose it a little bit, and overexpose it a lot. And so that's an easy way to get creative control over how you want it to look by doing bracketing in automatic mode. Or you can also do it in program mode. So if you're in program mode, the same thing applies. So aperture priority mode, what that means is the camera is going to take a light meter reading as you have to press the shutter button, and then again right before the shutter goes off, and it's going to determine what the best shutter speed is. And it's important to note that when you're in aperture priority mode, it uses a stepless shutter, meaning that if you go from 1 second to 1/1000th of a second, there's literally an infinite number of shutter speeds it could use. You're limited on the dial to 1/125th, 250th, 500th. This, however, when you're in automatic exposure mode, is limited to nothing. It could do 1/320th of a second, or 1/2 and a little bit more of a second, or it could do 1/999th of a second. It's simply not limited. So it gives you a lot more exposure control. All you have to do is select your aperture. And what you want to do is select basically for depth of field, whether you want to have a shallow depth of field or a deep depth of field. And you can also select your aperture based on how it's going to render the image. Different apertures see light in different ways, and so an image that is 1/250th at f8, while it would meter the same as one that is 1/500th at f5.6, will look slightly different because the light coming through the lens will be different, and so it'll have a slightly different color cast. Some people can notice it, some people can't. I can notice it when there's about a 2-stop difference between images. Some people are more sensitive than that. So if you understand how that's going to work, and it's a little bit beyond the scope of this video, so it's worth playing around with and getting a sense of how your camera does it and how your lenses work, because there'll be differences in that as well, then you can get different creative effects that way. So aperture priority mode, you just set the aperture and it selects the absolute ideal shutter speed for the lighting conditions based on your aperture. Program mode works a little bit differently. Program mode takes away all of the control from you. So manual mode gives you complete control. Aperture priority mode gives you some control. I think it's the best mode. I like aperture priority the best. Program mode gives you no control. Program mode on the Nikon FG, there are 3 different program modes, and the camera selects them based on what lens you have. There's a program mode for the 50mm 1.4, there's a program mode for the 50mm 1.8, and then there's a program mode for everything else. And you don't have any control over it. The camera automatically picks which one it is. And so what you do with program mode is set your camera to the smallest aperture, which is your highest number, in this case f/22. And what that does is it tells the camera what apertures it has available. It knows that it's an f3.5 lens, and it knows that it can stop down to f/22. So if you take a picture, it will automatically select the best aperture and shutter speed for the situation. And of note, whereas I talked about the aperture priority mode having a stepless shutter, this has a stepless shutter speed as well. It also has a stepless aperture. So in program mode, the camera is not limited to f3.5, 5.6, 11, 8, 16. It is not limited to what's marked on your lens. The FG could do f3.6, 3.7, 3.8, 5.1, 11.3. It can do literally any aperture that your lens is capable of, and it just picks the best one based on the lighting situation. So it's very advanced, but it takes complete control away from you. All you do is point the camera and click, and that's one of the reasons why I said in the first video that cameras with program mode are seen as amateurish, because that's how point and shoot cameras work. You just point it at something and take a picture, and the camera does all the work. And so there's not a lot of thought that goes into how am I going to do this image? How am I going to make this image look like I want it to look in my mind? I think that program mode has its uses. It can be good for learning the basics of a camera, and then once you've learned the basics of the camera, graduating to aperture priority mode, and then full manual to learn how the cameras interface, how the lens interface, how they function, and how that creates an image. How does aperture mixed with shutter speed create an image, for instance? That's what you learn in manual mode. But program mode is good for the first time or two taking a camera out. Program mode does also have one other really fantastic use that a friend of mine pointed out to me that I'd never thought of. If you want to hand your camera to someone to take a picture, who knows if that person can take a competent picture? Probably not. It's a good bet that they can't, especially just being handed a camera for the first time. If you put it in program mode, well, the camera's going to do all the thinking for them. As long as they can focus it and point it at you, the photo will turn out acceptably. All right, so here we are looking through the viewfinder on the Nikon FG. And let's see, I'm hand holding this. I apologize for the shaky cam. So looking through the viewfinder, here's what you're going to see. can see in the middle there's a split ring, and I can't quite get the foreground in focus, so you'll have to trust me that as the foreground comes into focus, you'll have two parts of the image. Here we go. You can see how there's two parts of the image, and they'll come together and line up when the image is in focus. Now you can also see there's a dark ring in the center there. Right here, there's a darker ring. That indicates everything inside of that ring accounts for 60% of the metering data for the camera's light meter. Everything outside of that ring accounts for 40% of the metering data. All right, so we're looking over on the right side at the light meter, and I'm going to explain now what that's telling you. You can see that there's a scale on the right side from 1/1000th. It's hard to read because it's in red, down to 1 second, and then a flash indicator. And so when I pull the lever out and half depress the shutter button, what happens is that the flashing light indicates what my shutter speed should be. The solid light indicates what my shutter speed is. So as I adjust the shutter speed, that adjusts the solid light. If I adjust the aperture, that adjusts the flashing light. Oh, come back, flashing light. If I adjust the flashing light, that adjusts the aperture. And so in order to meter properly in manual mode, what you would do is just line up the shutter, the flashing dot, with the solid dot. And when you have one solid dot and no flashing dot, that's the camera telling you you're metered properly, everything's good to go, you can take the picture now. That's in manual mode. In aperture priority mode, there will be a dot next to the shutter speed, or the approximate shutter speed that it's going to give you an idea of what your shutter speed's going to be, so you know if you can handhold it or if you have to find a tripod or other stable resting place for it. All right, and one last thing before we go, I'm going to try to get the alarm beep to go off on this. Let's see if I can do that. There we go. That's the alarm beep. So if you have the alarm mode set to on, that'll beep to let you know that there's not enough light, which is what that was telling me right now. It will also scare away anything you're trying to take a photo of. So I strongly recommend not using the alarm beep if you can help it. The alarm beep does not, however, unfortunately, beep in time with the self-timer. Some cameras it does. So honestly, I don't see any reason to ever have that on anything except mute. At any rate, if this video was helpful, please leave me a thumbs up. That lets me know I'm on the right track. You can also subscribe and find out when I have more videos being released. If you have any questions, please leave those in the comments section, and I try to respond to them fairly quickly. If you have any comments or suggestions for other videos, please let me know. And if I have the technical know-how and the equipment, I'm more than happy to film that video for you. And one last thing, before I show you some photos I've taken with this exact camera, thank you guys for watching.